It's a special holiday episode. We asked you guys in the audience to send in a tale of how you first got into BSD, and we're going to share those with you today. We're also going to be playing 2 bonus mini interviews, so get comfy by the fire, grab a warm beverage, and come listen to some BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 69, Under the Porch Tree. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
We're glad to have you guys with us today on this special Christmas episode. So, of course, we've been asking for you guys to send in your stories, how you first got involved with BSD, and we're going to share those with you guys today as a special bonus episode. So, first up, we're going to start with some emails we got, and the first one is from Jason. So I'm going to read this one here. So Jason writes in and says, "It all started with my first paid IT job as a help desk analyst. I was working for a well-known hard drive manufacturer at the time. I was starting to get more involved in networking as I was on the swing shift, and on-call people always did not want to respond for network issues. I can understand that. At some point, I was given a login to the routers, and it was not long before I had the enable password as well. From that point on, the on-call person had to do was read email and see what I had done the night before in case someone asked what happened. The network manager was a big FreeBSD fan. He had a system in his office that was running FreeBSD current. Every morning or so, he would come in and run the usual CVS up, make build world, make build kernel, etc. to keep up to date. The more and more I helped and got involved in the network, more I realized I wanted to have an interface that was easier to run multiple telnet sessions from and copy and paste between windows like he was always doing. So I got a second computer at my desk, installed FreeBSD 2.2.2 from floppy disk. Wow. He said, well, I booted the kernel from 2 floppies and then I installed over the internet. Anyway, after using it for weeks and breaking it, rebuilding it, I invested in a CD-ROM copy from Walnut Creek as it was taking too long to install over RT1. After I moved over to being a junior network engineer full-time, I took on the responsibility of helping maintain DNS, SOC server, and a few other systems in the network group, all running by BSD OS, a la BSDI. I soon had a machine at home running FreeBSD as well to play with in my off time, and I was a full-time subscriber to the CD-ROM delivery for each release. Once broadband was available in my area, Cox at home, I set up a FreeBSD box as my firewall. It was interesting to think at that time, but few broadband subscribers actually had a firewall, and boy, that could be fun. But I digress, and I became an IP filter expert doing all sorts of fun stuff. Over time, my knowledge and use of FreeBSD translated into helping support some Linux, Slackware, Red Hat version 5 to 7, pre-Red Hat Enterprise Linux days, servers for employees, as well as deploying FreeBSD for certain services sometimes. Later, I ended up getting a job as a full-time sysadmin network engineer, supporting a large Linux deployment with some Solaris mixed in, all thanks to a former manager introducing me to a pretty awesome OS. I still prefer a Unix-like desktop for work and when I'm being a paid sysadmin. I run the same OS that is used in production, which CentOS, Scientific Linux, Red Enterprise. If I'm just being a network engineer, I run PCBSD now. Thanks, Chris. You're welcome. He said, I still have a FreeBSD-based firewall at home protecting my network, pfSense. He said, it's always fun to tell people I use FreeBSD as they either come back with, what is that, or is that still around? And then I love to point them to things like how Netflix, WhatsApp, and Juniper all use FreeBSD. Well, very cool. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
You're
next
up,
we
Alan.
have a story from Adam. So he says he became interested in Unix probably because he saw several forms of it running in some lab computers where his dad worked. He said he saw HPUX and SCO and some other ones, and one memorable aspect of it was a non-working backspace key.
Oh, nice.
He says I've always been interested in computers since being exposed to the Commodore 64 in elementary school. He says he's used various low-end PCs at home in the middle education and so on. He said once he had seen Unix, he wanted to try using it just out of curiosity, so he borrowed some SCO install floppies he found at his father's workplace just to experiment, but they were not a complete installation set, so that didn't quite work.
Oh, no.
He said he had been in the habit of checking out books from the local public library on computers and other topics of interest. So he checked out a handful of books about Unix. He learned that a typical Unix prompt started with a $sign. One of the books provided a comparison between System V and BSD and the Bourne shell versus the C shell. From the characteristics described, I determined I would appreciate BSD and the C shell more than the alternative, so I concentrated on investigating BSD. This is one of the main reasons I've stuck with BSD despite several individuals trying to convince me to use Linux instead. He said, in high school, he vaguely remembers trying to download FreeBSD 216, failing for some reason, but then he tried 217 and that worked. He recalls being very unfamiliar with Unix job control, resorting to using Control Z and logging out to end a process because he didn't know how to kill the process and so on. He says, I recall being completely unaware of package_add, although I was aware of packages and did my best to manually untar and execute them in his home directory. He said he stuck with it because it was similar to DOS, but interesting and new. He says he appreciated the experience and eventually learned how to set up useful server processes such as Samba and printing, as well as a useful desktop. It kind of reminds me of my story. I remember I used to download the Apache source code and compile it myself because I didn't quite understand how you customize ports or how when you install a port, it gets registered in the package system. So when you can actually uninstall it and it removes all the files. I didn't quite get the difference. And I don't think I understood how to update my ports tree originally. So it was always the version of ports that had come with the install version. So they didn't get updated and stuff. Tarsnap wasn't a thing yet back when I started. Anyway, continuing with the story. He said, I continued to concentrate on using FreeBSD when he went to university, and he upgraded using the source code from 22x to 3.0 and beyond. About a month after starting university, he applied for a job in computers so he could stop working in the cafeteria, and his computing and Unix skills gave him an edge to obtain the position, because most people in university, when they're first starting, don't quite have that level of experience that he had already had. Some years later, he worked my way up to the ranks and was in charge of the Unix infrastructure at the university and applied his Unix experience mainly towards Solaris and Debian before gradually replacing both of those with a majority of FreeBSD servers. Good man. Good man. Compiling FreeBSD from source code took less time than using the binary patches on Solaris, and where the backspace key still doesn't work out of the box. FreeBSD was more flexible than Debian in more significant software configurations, and he says, I continue to provide solutions based on his 17 years of FreeBSD experience where applicable and look forward to using it even more in the future.
Oh, very cool. Awesome, Alan. Well, thank you. Okay, next up is David, and he writes in and says, 13 years ago, I was accidentally involved on Linux. Indeed, before I did not know anything about Unix, hence I had no plans to do my work with the Solaris server at the time. But for FreeBSD, that was different. Just before I tried many Linux distributions until Slackware and heard that it was followed more or less the BSD philosophy. Then he thought, BSD, what is that? Rather than using the original carbon copy attempt, I thought, so unlike many people, it was not because a friend or a colleague, but just a greedy curiosity, which I still have a bit. I was then amazed by the installation via sysinstall, ugly, but very effective. I love the fact that the base system and third-party software was separated. I also like the fact that with ports, we could be able to choose exactly what options it was going to compile with. For example, using semaphores instead of mutexes for MySQL was a win-win at this time, instead of accepting the choices in the maintainer or rebuild the packages like I did for Debian and Red Hat. After FreeBSD, I also tried OpenBSD and NetBSD, but FreeBSD was the champion in my mind already. Afterwards, in my following positions, I did not get the chance to use it. Linux was always the obvious choice, but I tried to keep in touch with my current one. They are more open, plus the systemd madness and such. And I also got more in spare time, and then I decided to get involved for the first time in contributing in open source projects. Better late than never, especially hardened BSD since the good Sean Webb interview we did. Oh, that's cool. I guess we encourage somebody to get involved in the project there. That's awesome. He says, so thank you. Keep on with the great show. I never miss an episode. Kind regards. Well, thank you, David. That was awesome.
This one's got the subject in the slot. Okay, so this one is Brad's story? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
The paste has the how I got into BSD is the author instead of missing the anyway.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, so this is Brad's story. He says, "Hey guys, I just listened to episode 65 and thought I would submit my BSD tale, pedestrian though it is." He said he started as a happy Linux user back in '95 when he took over system administration of a handful of Sun OS boxes. He says he couldn't afford a Sun box for home, so he used Linux to teach himself Sun OS. At the time, I was referred to a small ISP who was running BSDI, or BSDOS. They said they were having a couple of problems, one of which was their mail routing, for which I rewrote his sendmail.cf file. That must have been fun.
Nice.
And the other was a problem customer who had a modem over Ethernet setup that was putting 60 cycle noise on the line and couldn't maintain a connection. So he said, so I've been doing Linux, first Slackware, then Red Hat, and then Debian, both privately and professionally. I started to listen to BSD Now ever since I first heard it announced, and listening to you guys, I started to think that it had some neat features. The more that he's listened, the more intrigued he became, especially with PCBSD. So he fired up a late 9.x in VirtualBox and started playing with 10.0 as well. And actually found some hardware to test it on, and I've been maintaining an install of all the major packages that he has on his Debian laptop on PCBSD. Now it's just a matter of, as you so eloquently put it, learning to know what I didn't know that I didn't know.
Yep. Yeah, you don't know the things exactly. You don't know, right?
The unknown unknowns. Especially the differences between Linux and BSD and the differences between the different BSD flavors. It says for him, it seems like living in the US and moving to Canada. I don't know. There's less difference in the US and Canada. I guess it'd kind of be like moving to the UK where they're speaking English, but they're saying things that don't make any sense.
Right.
So it's different, but only subtly so. Plus, the community is so welcoming and friendly, and he's gotten good help on IRC. And also got some good-natured ribbing about using Bash. He's also a fan of the mailing list and asking us questions directly. Since the systemd debacle, and for reasons which are too long to go into and not related to BSD, he's been considering making the switch more and more seriously. As he told one of his friends, he's one broken systemd upgrade away from nuking and repaving with PCBSD. In the meantime, he built one of those EconoNAS boxes from the story we covered a couple months ago, which was a story we featured. He says he's setting it and retiring his Debian file server, which will then convert to using ZFS. So he's looking forward to having snapshots on his NAS. And he says, so thanks for showing that here's life outside of Linux. And he says, where do we get the cookies? Right, because we say...
Well, you have to drive to your store or come to a conference, and hopefully there will be cookies and snacks.
You got to come to a conference to collect your cookies.
There you go. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Brad. And next up, we actually have a video, which will be showing from Reese. So let's go ahead and take that away.
Hello, Alan, Chris, and TJ, and viewers, I guess, if you play this on the air. My name's Reese, and my RC handle's Bank. And I started using BSD around version 8. And then I ended up reinstalling it after I watched BSD Now because Alan talked about it on Tarsnap. I enjoy all the tutorials and got this shirt from the Tor Relay one. And yes, I run it on OpenBSD. And more of the watchers need to run it on BSD because we can't put all our eggs in one basket. Thank you, and everybody have a safe and happy holiday.
Thank you, Reese, for the video. We appreciate you sending that in. Next up, we have another video from Brian, so go ahead and take that away.
Hi, I'm Brian from the OpenBSD project. I go as Bryant on IRC in the mailing list sometimes. Canadian Brian on Twitter. This is a video for the How'd You Get Introduced to BSD from the BSD Now podcast. I got started with Unix when I was pretty young. I got introduced to QNX2 at school from using the Unisys Icon or Burroughs Icon computers. They were labs full of them. They had daisy chain, coaxial networking. Anyway, I got introduced then. Started using some other ones at home. Tested coherent Unix, several other commercial variants. I introduced to Linux, used Slackware and Debian, and I tried NetBSD for a few years. Couldn't get into the community very well. Used Minix 2 for a little short period of time on an old laptop. Mostly just playing around with the environment, figuring out how the different server processes interacted and the community around that. Talked to someone who ported their ported Minix 2 to some homebrew CPU, which is pretty cool. Around 2010, 2011, I got a laptop for my first 64-bit AMD machine, and one of the features that weren't supported for that CPU family was frequency scaling. It would run at the maximum 2.1 gigahertz clock rate that it was designed for, and there was no functionality in OpenBSD at the time to do any scaling. They had K8 support. That was an older generation of AMD processors, and the functionality had changed rather significantly from that microarchitecture. So I added support with that with the help of some other people. It got committed, I think by Claudio Jecker from the OpenBSD project. I worked on a few other subsystems like other drivers, via Rhine, 100 megabit adapter for ACPI suspend resume, various manual user land fixes, did something to top. It was pretty funny. It allows you to hide a single user from the display, so you could, on a heavily loaded desktop, remove your processes from the list and see what else is running on the system, which is convenient in some cases. Mostly just really small stuff. I haven't done much, but it was enough to get a CVS account, a commit bit on OpenBSD. I lost it for a little while, but then I got it back. I haven't done anything significantly since then, so I might lose it again, but hopefully I can do something to keep it. I got a Blade 1000 Spark 64 donated by Ian Darwin. I have a G3 iMac, a 68K Mac laptop, but I probably won't do anything with that. I've only been in the OpenBSD project for a few years now, but I'm familiar with quite a few of the developers now, and I've never been to a hackathon yet, and I probably won't. I have some anxiety issues which don't permit me to attend that kind of activity, but I would like to continue to get to know more people in the community, and I'm also on Reddit. I go with Bryant on Reddit, and I try to keep active on the various subreddits related to BSD and Unix, and post news articles and articles on different things being developed by people in the BSD community. Wrote a small article for Antoine Jacquetot's RCCTL utility, which was introduced or going to be introduced in OpenBSD 5.7, which is really cool. Lets you automate a lot of editing of rc.conf.local and keep that managed in a way so you're not fumbling with text editor, even though you still can. It's preferred by a lot of people. I just want to say the BSD Now show is really cool. TJ and Alan and Chris really enjoy watching that show.
Okay, we're back. Thanks, Brian, for the nice video you sent in here.
Looking forward to that RCCTL. It reminds me of sysrc and how much that saved me on FreeBSD.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, next up we have an email. We're starting with Pete. So Pete writes in, my story is pretty common, but I reckon it may be worth sharing regardless. Back in 1999/2000, when all things .com were taking off, I got a job working at a friend's local ISP. Hey, same here. We had a couple T1s and a pool of modems, and life was grand. A previous employee who had more experience than me at the time had set up a FreeBSD shell server which also ran egg drop and various other IRC bots. I already had some limited experience using Unix type systems, basically IRIX and DEC at school, and lots of Slackware host hacking at home with some friends. So I was super excited to have a new OS handy to hack on. Well, one day we decided it would be prudent to update the shell server to patch security bugs and the like. It was running a lot of IRC bots, so obviously it was always a concern in the back of our minds. Fortunately, sitting on our bookshelf was the complete free BSD book by Greg Leahy. I pretty much knew right away I had signed up for too much, but I dove in regardless. I did some hacking on our shell server, was immediately amazed by pretty much everything on the system. It felt like a real OS, had integrated package management via the ports tree. As luck would have it, I left that job soon after to work at another startup and didn't think about FreeBSD for a couple years. Sure, I tested out from time to time, but my focus had turned to Solaris and then eventually to IRIX and Linux for graphics processing systems. So I was still interested in FreeBSD, but never had the work cycles to actually dive deep into it. That's until I was at New York City's Linux World Expo in 2004, and I saw a new group starting something there called New York City Bug, and they were having a BSD BOF there. I think this is where my focus on BSDs took off. After that meeting, I started attending NYC bug meetings regularly, hacking BSD systems whenever possible. I still try and be a semi-active member of NYC bug, despite the fact that I've moved away from NYC to Los Angeles on the West Coast. So apparently it's been 14 years from that day I cracked open Greg Leahy's book, and since then I've been a happy member of a lot of companies, always agitating to make wider use of BSD whenever possible.
That's a great story.
Oh, cool.
Yes,
Thanks, Pete.
users groups are great things to have around. I wish there was one here.
I wonder what the percentage of people are who first exposed to BSD at an ISP, like dial-up ISPs in the 90s.
A lot of people.
I know we've had others say that too.
Yeah, a lot of people of our generation, that's how everything started.
Yeah. That's the same here. It was like I got a job in an ISP, and that's what they ran was free BSD to manage all these modems.
Mine was a little related, but slightly. I got involved in Unix and BSD because of IRC. Right, I was using an IRC client on Windows, but then I wanted to run a server, and I download the server program, and it's a .tar.gz. I'd never seen one of those before, but it opens in WinRAR. So and then I'm looking through it, and I'm like, "There's no exe file in here. How do you run this?" And someone tells me you need a shell account. I'm like, "What's a shell account?" And it went from there.
Oh, that's cool.
So next up we have Anders. He says, as with many others that got into BSD, he originally came from Linux. He started with Slackware sometime in the late 90s. In about 2000, he ordered CDs for the 3 major BSDs to try each of those. And he ran first NetBSD on a Pentium 90, but it never made it to his main computer.
Sure.
When he went to university, he bought a Mac laptop, so he couldn't find a PC that he was confident Linux would run on and needed Unix for his sanity. Fast forward to after he was done university, it was time to replace his now aging laptop. After expensive research, he found a Linux-compatible laptop. Extensive research. He found a Linux-compatible laptop, and he installed Ubuntu on it and didn't have time anymore to fiddle around so much as he did when he used Slackware. But things had changed.
Sure.
A lot of things he had learned running Slackware didn't really apply anymore on Ubuntu. He still had the BSDs in the back of his mind, and he was an avid podcast listener, so he'd heard Will Bachman's BSD Talks. One of the first episodes he listened to was episode 208, Teaching Unix Using BSD, where he pointed out that the basic working of OpenBSD has stayed largely the same since it started, which makes it a nice target for teaching because things don't get changed out from underneath you. Since he was already used a BSD-style init from Slackware, that was appealing to him. Long story short, no more Linux for him. He's running FreeBSD with ZFS on an HP microserver and PCBSD on his desktop. With reports of people moving to BSD due to systemd, I feel like a bit of a hipster. I abandoned Linux for BSD before it was cool, but largely for the same reasons. Linux felt messy and unnecessarily complicated. Since you come out with an episode every week, his BSD batteries get a fresh charge every Friday. Thanks for the great show, and it's a great way to end the week. Thank you very much.
Cool.
I'm glad we can keep you charged up.
Yep. Okay, next up is Glammo, who says, how I got into BSD. He says, hey guys, well, this is my story. As many of the BSD users, I started off as a Linux user around the year 2000 with Red Hat Linux 5.1, and next year I began digging about something called FreeBSD and how it was different from Linux. I ended up ordering, I guess it was FreeBSD 4.2 from BSD Central site, and then I installed it. Didn't have the knowledge on how to fully configure, so I kept documenting myself until I got back with FreeBSD 4.6 and found that compiling a kernel was a lot easier on Linux, which I was having a lot of trouble compiling at the time. I can empathize there. I remember doing my first kernel compile on each and how much different
it was. Like make build world or build kernel and it's done. It's like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. That was easy. One generic. I'd usually just edit the generic file and away I went. It was very easy. He says, then I decided to give FreeBSD a try as my desktop, and I loved it from the start. Then it came to FreeBSD 5 story and knew about the Dragonfly BSD project and liked their ideas. Got involved starting with 1.0A version, testing and reporting a few bugs. Then I worked on translating Dragonfly the BSD FAQ to Spanish language and switched my desktop to it until the 2.x something version. He said he owned an internet cafe for a few years, and from there I used OpenBSD as a PF firewall for internet access on an old Pentium PC with 256 megs of RAM and a 1 gigabyte drive. While using BSDs, I created solobsd.org site, mostly dedicated to promote the use of the systems, writing tutorials and writing news for the Spanish language community for around 4 or 5 years until my daughters were born and I got a new job. So I got disconnected from the BSD Linux world for a while. Kept Dragonfly BSD on one of my old PCs without X, but mostly doing nothing with it as well as the OpenBSD for my old router PC. Now, after being abducted by Facebook for many years and being dropped, I got back into the BSD world and began to document myself again, mostly thanks to the BSD Now show, which I started to watch from episode 1. Well, thank you. He said, I have brought life again to solo BSD news site, but now into Google+, and started to record a little BSD Now-like show, but in Spanish on my YouTube channel. I have deployed a RAID 1 and OpenBSD on an old PC, which is a Duron 900 Plus, 512 megs RAM, old 1 gigabyte drive, and 2 40 gig drives. Well, very cool. Thanks for sending that in, Guillermo.
And it's nice to see more stuff for the non-English community as well.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for that. So next up, we have a story from Jonathan. He says he got into BSD back in 1998. He says he was trying to share his 56K PPP connection between him and his brother. I think that's how Colin Percival got involved in BSD.
Why would you share it? 56K is not enough to share.
At the time, that was 5 kilobytes a second. After having 14.4, that was a big improvement.
That's true.
So he says they both had their own computers with a 10-base-T network and hated dragging the modem between the PCs, so they needed NAT and demand dial. I remember my first network between my computers was over a parallel port or a serial port or something.
Oh, yeah.
It was epically slow. It was slower than my internet connection, or only moderately faster than the internet connection. So anyway, he says he first tried Linux, but it was fairly confusing and had no clear documentation. So then he tried FreeBSD 3.0, and it was perfect. It had demand dial, NAT, everything, and the handbook just explains how to set it up. And it had it right out of the box. So he set up his old 46 DX2 with 8 megabytes of RAM and set it up as a dedicated dial-up router. Of course, that wasn't enough, and I eventually got a dedicated 56K line with a fixed IP from his ISP, and then ran its own mail server and web server for a couple of years.
Nice.
16 years later, he still uses FreeBSD, and he's currently running simulations for his dissertation on a few boxes in his basement. Between school and his wife and daughter and his job, he doesn't have much free time to give back to the FreeBSD community. But this time next year, he should be done with his PhD, and he'll try to submit a few ports that he's made in the process. So he says thanks to us for all of our work, and best of luck in the new year, and best of luck to him too.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Okay, next up we have Adam. He says, hey, a few weeks ago I found out about your podcast and I became a fan and haven't missed an episode since. But this is not the topic. This should be about me and how I got into BSD, so here it goes. I had previous experiences with Linux, which I used on a semi-regular basis for a few years. When I got to university and found out we had 2 servers for our use, I was more than happy. One was running CentOS 6 something, and the second one was running FreeBSD 9.3. Having experience with Linux, the CentOS one was an easy choice. I was using it regularly and everything was fine and dandy. But one day somebody decided to upgrade the OS to a later version and everything went to crap, messing libraries and such. This made me wonder, what about the other one? It couldn't be that bad, right? So I decided to give it a try. First experience was much more than pleasant. I got to use it more and more, and eventually I would switch my virtual machines to FreeBSD and OpenBSD, and have been happy ever since. I also switched OS on my desktop for FreeBSD because of ZFS. The only thing I pity is that I can't run BSD on my laptop due to lack of hardware support. But well, one can't have it all. Hope you don't mind reading this, and thank you for making the awesome show, and keep on rocking, Adam. Well, thank you, Adam, and we hope you will get the hardware support here soon to run BSD on your laptop.
I think there's only really two things missing, right? The Haswell and that one Intel driver.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Hopefully
11 later this year does that, or 10.2 even.
So we're hoping to get that sorted. But yeah, that's
cool.
That's one of the things I've always liked about FreeBSD is if you install something in 9.x, it's going to work with all the 9.x's, and you can do that minor upgrade with the assurance that it's not going to just break everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, at this time, we'd like to go ahead and, of course, mention the sponsor for this week's episode, which is Tarsnap, and that URL, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go there, let them know we sent you, get signed up with a new account. You need to start doing backups. New Year's is coming, guys. This is a great New Year's resolution. I should back up my data this year, and I should do it off-site, and I should do it in a way where it's encrypted so I know off-site nobody's going to be poking around at my data. So Tarsnap is definitely the solution for you. So go to Tarsnap, get set up. They got clients for pretty much everything under the sun, including Cygwin clients for Windows. So you can run it pretty much anywhere and roll your keys, set up your prepaid account, and away you go. Now, anything you want to say on that, Alan?
There's no excuse to lose your data.
Yeah, I'm on. It's going to be 2015 in a couple weeks, guys. That's losing data. That's so 10 years ago.
Well, it reminds when I was in college, we had this one class about disaster recovery. And our first assignment for like the second week was everyone had to give like a 3 or 4 minute presentation on one time where they had lost data. And every single person in the class had a story. And almost every one of the stories was, and I didn't have a good enough backup. So I know everybody has a story, and so they should have Tarsnap. And then the story will have a happy ending.
Yes, it'll have a good ending. Like, oh, I just recovered my data, no big deal. Done.
Tarsnap should change their slogan instead of online backups for the truly paranoid. It's like, you do want a happy ending, right?
Yes. Nice. Okay, well, we got a couple interviews coming up for you guys. First up is Irwin Lansing, who's going to be talking about BSD advocacy in Europe and getting people involved. And then we also have Christina Vintella, who will be talking about BSD conferences. So we hope you guys both enjoy these mini interviews we did a while back.
This week we're joined by Irwin Lansing of the FreeBSD Foundation. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The first question we always ask people is, how did you first get involved with BSD?
Oh, that's a long time ago. I'm originally a biologist, and at the time there wasn't much money in biology, and the .com hype was at its fullest. And I made my hobby into my work, and started working for a small startup doing web hosting based on FreeBSD.
And that's how you got into it. And then how did you actually become a member of the project?
I just started committing small patches to small Perl modules and slowly got more and more involved. And this is about 2000, so 3 years. Just got more and more involved in the Ports project and joined the Ports management team as a secretary. And a year or two later, made full voting member of Port Manager and joined the FreeBSD Foundation board 3 or 4 years ago as well.
Cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your day job?
I work for DK Hostmaster, which wants to .dk ccTLD. The funny joke about our job is that DNS is what we do least because it just works. But it involves a lot of FreeBSD and unfortunately also Debian Linux.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do with the foundation?
Originally I was brought on board of the foundation to represent the Ports interest because there wasn't any Ports committer on or Ports developer on board of the foundation. And the other thing was to have more visibility into the European continent with Robert Watson in the UK, and we wanted to have one more member in Europe. And one of the things we talked about here in Sofia was that we actually still don't have that much visibility into the European BSD community. In the US and Canada, we've been doing quite a lot of work to reach out to our major users, doing the vendor summits, going to visit companies, and to hear how are they using FreeBSD and how we can help them either support their products better, get more in touch with the community, and just get an understanding of how they actually use FreeBSD and help them be better at it. We don't have that visibility in Europe. We don't have that much of an idea who is actually using FreeBSD in Europe, and we try to get more in touch with our European users. So the thing we talked about here is we have 2 board members in Europe. We only speak, well, I do speak Dutch, Danish, and English. Robert speaks mostly English. We're not going to reach all of the language areas in Europe. We know the people who speak English, they're actively involved, but there is a large community out there that doesn't speak English very well. We don't get to talk to them. We can't add another 20 board members to do all that work, so we're going to have to rely on the local community to do that work for us. And we've discussed several models of how we can do that, how to get more people to go to conferences, support them by having them have translated flyers to hand out at the conferences, and all kinds of stuff. So we actually also want to do an appeal to the community. If you are interested in going out to conferences, represent FreeBSD and the FreeBSD Foundation, also go and talk to companies and find out how they use FreeBSD and feed that information back to the foundation, so we can feed that information further back to the developers who actually work on those projects to let them know how people actually are using the work they're doing. Please let us know.
Right. Is there any other resources you provide other than maybe like translated flyers? The other things you could do to help the people in other countries? Or I guess also ask them what would help them so that you know what to give them.
Yes, exactly. So if there's anything else, what we haven't thought about, what you could use, where we can provide you with the support to do that work, also let us know. I think translating flyers, we're going to heavily depend on the translation project that's already there within the project. So we'll contact them to do either do the work or find the people who can do that.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
I think that's the most important things we've discussed at this conference. I love being back in Sofia. It's been a great conference so far. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're joined now by Christina Vintella. Thank you for being on the show with us this week. We appreciate it. And she's here at EuroBSDCon as a part of Google's Women in Technology program. And I guess they sponsor you to come out to the conference? Is that how it works?
Yes, I found out about the grant. I applied about 2 hours before the deadline.
Oh, hey. But you got in, so that's all that matters.
Very happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me to the interview.
Before we get to our questions, so where'd you say you're from, and where do you live or work now?
I'm originally from Romania. Mm-hmm. I moved out of the country about 3 years ago, and now I live in Düsseldorf in Germany, working on a mobile payments project.
And you said you don't speak a whole lot of German, so I imagine that's still interesting. Okay, so the first question we ask everyone is, I'll let you get the next one. Sorry. What was your first experience with BSD? How did you first get introduced to any BSD operating system?
Okay, this was about 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. I got a job after my second year of faculty because it was economics school and I got terribly bored, so I ended up into Linux and BSD and Cisco. Mm-hmm. I was working for Bitdefender, an antivirus Romanian company, in the technical support of small and medium businesses, and they had a mail server antivirus solution supporting a lot of the mail servers on the Linux boxes, but also one on the BSD, actually the FreeBSD one. And that's how I used it for a year or so, part of my work.
So what version of FreeBSD was it, if you remember?
I don't even remember. I don't know if it was 3 something or 5. No, I don't recall.
It's been a while. It's an older version.
Yeah, cool. Well, you've probably been in the 4 branch around that time, I think. Something like that. So how did you find out about EuroBSDCon?
Actually, I went back to Romania for holidays in August, and for some reason the guys in Bitdefender still like me and we hang out, so we went for drinks, And a colleague who's also here, former colleague from Bitdefender, Theo, he told me, oh, I'm going to this BSDCon, and I'm sure you like it very much. And by the way, Google offers a grant, but you have to subscribe. Oh yeah, today is the last day, and it was about 9 p.m. We're having this like, guys, I'm going home. I have a submission to make, and yeah, that's how I found it.
So I guess the obvious question is, how have you been enjoying the conference?
I was freaked out at first because it's been too long and I'm not really working in the domain anymore, but everyone was so nice. I got here Friday and I went to the dinner Friday evening, and I didn't recognize Theo Derat, and I just sat one seat away from him at the open BSD table, and I mean everyone was like, who are these two guys sitting here with backpacks? We don't know anyone. And they were really nice to us, and they explained a lot of things. And the talks awesome as well.
Yeah, the talks are good, but sometimes just sitting down and chatting.
The dinner conversation is usually the best part.
Yeah, it is.
And you sit with different people every night, so you get to talk to different people and find out what they're working on and what they're interested in. Yeah.
I think I liked best the Open BGPD presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. We saw that one in Tokyo.
Yes.
It's quite good.
Definitely. So the Google Women in Tech program, was it just for sponsoring you to get to this event, or are you affiliated with it in some other way, or is this all they do?
I know about the project because I looked it up following the EuroBSDCon site, but I'm not involved with anything. At least not for now.
Sure.
No.
Who knows in the future?
Yeah.
Have you met any of the other women that came as part of the program?
I think 2 of them. Yeah.
I think there's 3 plus yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd say it is women are a little underrepresented at a lot of these conferences. So.
Yeah, so it's good to have more of them coming out and enjoying it, and then seeing that there's lots of nice people here.
Yes. So you mentioned you have a PhD. Explain to us. Yeah, this is interesting. So explain to us a little bit what your work was.
It started with the masters that I've done in cryptography, and one of my professors was impressed about how cheap my account can be if I have coffee and I start talking about WiMAX. There were 2 things in parallel. Then developed the 3GPP, developed the 4G evolution, and WiMAX Forum already launched their WiMAX solution for 4G-like technology, but it wasn't very successful. And they had a PhD program into next generation networks, and they said, okay, would you be interested? And I started to work with them for 3 years, and I looked mostly, because I also worked in voice over IP with the company that I used to work for then. It was the right combination to look into 4G and voice over IP, and the fact that 4G offers a plain IP infrastructure. Okay, let's look into what security challenges would there be in making VoLTE, voice over LTE work. And I haven't gotten too far, because if you just try to assimilate the 2 technologies, you spend 2 years digging through 3GPP specs, but it was cool times.
Were there any particular challenges that you've come up against so far with with something like 4G? If someone's doing voice over IP, then obviously that's just going out over the air, right?
Biggest challenge was the lack of tools to experiment with, and I'm not an experienced programmer. I can write really basic code, but if you're up against studying 2 architecture integration and you have no tools, you don't even know where to start.
Yeah, there's no telemetry and debugging tools that makes it a lot harder to do anything.
Not even, now there is, and there was back then also. Fraunhofer, it's a research institute in Berlin. Fraunhofer Focus, they had OpenIMS, which was the IMS core implemented also and distributed also as open source, and now they have OpenEPC, and I think they integrated somehow. I haven't kept in touch with the project anymore, but they hadn't had released anything yet back then, so there was no tooling on the 4G core network. That was a challenge. Yes. It's better when you experiment a bit rather than...
It's a lot easier to do research when you're not having to guess at everything and not being able to see what's going on.
Yeah, and just theoretic work becomes tedious. Want to experiment a bit.
Well, cool. Well, would you recommend EuroBSDCon or other BSD conferences to other folks?
Definitely. I mean, for the kind of level of development and contributors to the BSD project, people are very approachable and friendly, even with the very noobs of us.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception a lot of people get, that conferences like this are just for developers, and really even the developers get more from the conference the more users that come, because if you get to, as a developer, you talk to the users and you find out what it is what problems and needs they have, so you can then adapt what you're working on to fit their needs better.
It's you thinking in a different way too.
Yeah, and the users provide a perspective that the developers don't necessarily have. And so I think, yeah, it's a common misconception that these conferences are only for developers, and we need more users and non-developers at these conferences. So will you be back next year?
Definitely.
Good.
Well, we'll find out where it is here pretty soon for next year too. So in a couple hours. Well, excellent. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us before we go, or?
I freaked out when I've met Andrew Tannenbaum.
Yes, Andrew Tannenbaum is here.
Like in person, he's sitting there in front of me. They couldn't find his badge. He had to have a written badge.
Yes. So he had a handwritten
like then how do you write that? No, you're not on the list. That was yesterday early morning.
How am I not on the list?
How can I not be on the list? It's all cool. We're casual like that. It's
yeah, no, it's fine.
Well, they had a stack of blank cards specifically because they knew that would happen.
Yep. Well, great. Well, we appreciate you being on the show with us, Christina, and look forward to seeing you at other conferences, and hope you enjoy the rest of this one.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed those interviews, and you know, this is one cool thing I want to mention about conferences. You know, we record a lot of these at conferences, right? And conferences are where you get to run into the cool people that you see us interview on this show every week. Most of these guys are at various conferences throughout the year. So maybe next year, 2015, you should make an effort to get out one or two or as many of these as you can make it to, and get to meet all these people in person. Sit down, have some food, share a beer with them, and just talk BSD. I mean, talk about recharging your battery. If this show's doing it for you, the conference will do it even more.
If you've never done it before, I highly recommend it. After my first one, I was like, these are amazing. I want to go to all of them. And it's made a big difference. But for those of you who can't, we're glad to be able to bring you interviews from, especially the ones in Europe and Tokyo and so on, where not everybody might be able to make it to that.
Definitely.
Or even for people in Europe when we go to the ones in Canada and the U.S. But yes, we look forward to meeting more and more of you as we attend all these conferences.
Yep.
And
definitely.
One of the people that makes most of these conferences possible is IX Systems. They're usually a gold sponsor of almost every conference, on top of running their own conference in addition.
Just about every BSD conference, I think they are.
And obviously Meet BSD, which was a great fun. We both had fun there. Of course, you've been sick since then.
Well, you know, I don't know. It's just something about it gets cold outside and coming home after all the trips. I think I'm all worn down at that point. But it was still a fun conference. We really enjoyed it, and it's a good time to be there, and so many cool BSD people to talk to. And every conference is unique and different. I mean, sometimes you'll see some of the same talks between different ones, but there's always new stuff to do, new people to talk to, new stories to hear, and usually exciting stuff happens at the conference too. Like things get committed and fixed, and you know, it's always fun to see people huddled around a laptop or some little ARM board or something, and by the end of the conference, something that didn't work magically.
Yes, I remember in the lobby on I think it was the Saturday night or something, they were hacking on the Microsoft Surface. I think the Surface 2 or something. And they got the keyboard working while we were all just sitting around talking. And that's right. It was a great time.
But that was Meet BSD put on by IX Systems, which, of course, we should mention the URL for that is ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Go there, fill out the form, let them know that we sent you. Download the free guide on how to, what you need to know when you buy a server for open source, what to expect from your upstream vendor. And, of course, Alan can attest. He's bought a lot of hardware from IX over the years.
Including last week.
So what did you get
last
week?
Well, that was just more hard drives for the server I bought previously, but...
Oh, okay.
Okay,
but yeah, I know you showed last week like pictures of how they ship them and the care they took in getting these drives to you to make sure that
it's not just because they want the hard drives to get to you, but because they provide the warranty, and so if the hard drives get busted, it's their problem. But that's stuff they do, right? They have the free pre-purchase consulting where you can actually talk to someone who knows about ZFS. So you're going to build your big file server or whatever, and you need it to be able to do this. Well, it's someone that actually knows about the interaction between the hard drives and the storage server and how you're going to cable it and how it's going to actually perform. It means they'll be able to tell you. I was like, well, I want to host my VMs on this from a VMware or whatever, so I need it to be able to do at least this many IOPS, even under heavy random read load or whatever, and they'll be able to actually help you, right? They're not just, they didn't take a product knowledge course from Dell or something where they have to know a couple of buzzwords. They actually live and breathe this stuff, and that makes a big difference when you're getting help from someone that's to build the server. When they actually know what you want, you're not trying to have to explain what BSD is to someone that doesn't know.
Yeah.
For them to go, oh, I'll go research that for you. No, these guys just know.
Yeah.
And
the guys at IX are not a hurdle you have to overcome to get the hardware and the equipment set up the way you want. They're a help. They will make it happen, and maybe even suggest things that you hadn't considered that could improve your performance, more bang for your buck, etc.
Like in general, I recommend that when you contact them, you tell them what problem you're having, and they'll help you solve it, rather than saying, I need a server that's exactly like this. They can do that for you, but if you tell them exactly what you want, they probably have more experience than you do to actually put it together just right. And
and I've heard plenty of stories too, like, oh, we thought we were going to put an SSD in for this or that, and then when they explain what they're trying to run, a database or something else, and I will tell you, no, you should run it this way, and this will give you better performance.
Everybody thinks they want a ZIL, and it's like, well, depending on your workload, you might not want to do that. You might actually just use the SSDs for L2 ARC, and also, when you're doing a ZIL or an L2 ARC, it's not just any SSD, especially for the ZIL, you need a very high endurance SSD. Whereas for the L2 ARC, you probably want more size, so you go with a medium endurance one so that you can get more size for the same price. And like they mentioned here, also the reputable on-time delivery. When they say, we'll build the server tomorrow, and then we test it for 3 days, and then we'll ship it, you're actually going to know when you're going to get it. Sometimes it's like, we'll ship it sometime in the next 2 weeks or something, or, last time I ordered the last time I bought something before I started using IX, they're like, it turns out that's not in stock, but we've ordered it for you. And, 7 weeks later, I finally get my server and it was like, Jesus. So and, the other thing with IX is obviously the QA process. Like we just mentioned, they're actually going to put the machine together and test it for a couple days. And that just means that when you get it, it's going to work. You're not going to have to worry about anything. And then the post-purchase support, right? Even after you get the machine and get it set up, if you need help with something, they're there for you. And that makes a big difference. When I bought my first big machine from them, I was like, I don't know anything about multipath. How do I set this up? And they helped me out there.
Oh, very cool. So again, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Go ahead, let them know we sent you. Get you guys a shiny new server for 2015 ordered and on the way. So let's go right into some more stories we got from you guys. I guess first up is Chris, and I'll have you read that one. So
Chris says, it's not particularly impressive or interesting, but here's his story of how he got into BSD. He says he's a teenager who wanted to build a NAS a year or two ago. And he had heard from me about ZFS, and he kept talking about it. But he was running into some weird issues running it on Ubuntu. At some point, I realized that since I'm relatively inexperienced, using FreeBSD instead wouldn't be much different because he doesn't have a lot to unlearn yet, or he hadn't invested in Ubuntu enough where switching would be a big deal.
Sure. No bad habits have been made yet.
And so from his perspective, aside from learning how to use the ports tree instead of apt, it was pretty simple. So he did it, and he's been loving it ever since. He's grown to like the smaller and more open community compared to Linux and the easier authoritative documentation in the handbook. And he says he looks forward to potentially contributing in a few years once his programming skills have reached a point where he's comfortable subjecting other people to his work. And he says, thanks for the great work, and keep spreading the word.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for sending that in. So next up is from Tiger Shark, which I know who he is. He works in the PCBSD community, but let's go ahead and do this here. So he writes in, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is a great way to open any email. I began my exploration with computers in junior high with an Apple II. The tiny lab was run by the math department located near the math class I took. Eventually, I registered for an AppleSoft Basic class, soaking up what I could, but also gaining official access to the lab after school where cool 8-bit games were played. Awesome. Later in high school, I continued with elective classes in 6502 assembly, lots of in-class 8-bit games when the teacher was away, of course. Is that why you guys why everyone took classes
I remember
back then?
computer club when I was in school was getting to play games and like Super Stamper and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm at college too. It was the same thing. We were all in there to play StarCraft or Warcraft 2 or whatever. But anyway, he said they did Logo, Advanced Basic using Atari, and Apple Pascal. Soon after I graduated, I owned an Apple IIgs computer, which I tried to use for continuing my self-study of programming, but got sidetracked into games again. I decided that I needed other like-minded folk around me to help me learn and keep motivated, so I had a number of first meetings until a computer user group was formed. The members of the user group made much more progress than me and even produced some tangible results. I learned of and explored the crazy new GNOME Unix and Apple IIgs for a short time, which may have nearly been my first exposure to Unix concept and Figlet. After a while, then I was in college. Around this time, I obtained a second-hand Sun 3160, which exposed me to Sonos. That beast, along with the university and a local ISP, helped me to increase what I knew of Unix in one form or another. I also took C programming class a few times at the university and was the Sun OS user in the Unix club I helped start. Sometime after I left post-secondary school, I bought myself an IBM, automatically including the Microsoft Windows current at that time. I'm not sure exactly why, but one day I was in the store that also sold a lot of books, as Borders or Media Player or whatever, and discovered that a complete free BSD book with 2.2.6 CD-ROM discs was there. I also briefly explored BOS and actually successfully got X Windows running in it. For a short time, I dual or triple booted FreeBSD Windows and BIOS. Most of my programming had been for past class assignments, and although I was still highly interested in writing my own software, I again got sidetracked with playing computer games. Right? Same thing here. Skip ahead after too many wasted years. I have now returned to FreeBSD, but initially to the PCBSD 8.0 back in February 2010. Version. I can blame Microsoft and a hardware failure for this. The PC I had running Windows 7 somehow had its onboard Ethernet device fail. Windows could no longer access it or use it, so I replaced its function with a multimodal 3-COM PCI card. It was capable of 10-bit fast and gigabit Ethernet, but I believe due to slowest speeds being supported by the card, Windows 2 would not support it immediately. I had no reasonable internet access, but managed to obtain a PCBSD ISO from another PC running Vista, since I knew about any open source OS would support the hardware. I must have chosen PCBSD due to its spiffy marketing, I am unsure, but it worked with my hardware and I didn't look back at Windows 7 except in VirtualBox. Recent history. These days I am hoping to retrain all I've learned or relearn and add to my skills. I have since built the PCs that I use for FreeBSD or PCBSD or pfSense. I'm sometimes troubleshooting and trying to be of some service to the PCBSD or FreeBSD community. I have had a blog, a little daemon on my desktop at the PCBSD advocacy site that I haven't written on for quite a while now, and the site has since been taken down. I am the admin of the PCBSD wiki and the PCBSD forum site, doing my best to help keep spam and other abuses next to the never level. I have helped with writing documentation on the wiki, as well as doing the conversion of a few handbooks to a mildly fancy HTML. I am also an op on the IRC channel on PCBSD on Freenode, and I have attempted a few ports of things to FreeBSD and sometimes discover bugs worthy of mentioning to committers/devs. I have quite a few ideas I wish to flesh out, hopefully eventually. Unfortunately, I continue to burn a bit of time with silly games, but I think I have done better at actually accomplishing some things here and there. Well, thank you so much for sending that in. And shoot, you have done a great job. I know I and the other PCBSD guys really appreciate the work you've done on the forums, and the wiki has been awesome. So keep up the good work. You are definitely accomplishing a lot there. Because, there's a lot of users out there where that's their first exposure to it, and they need those good documentation. They need a good forum where they can go and ask questions and not be inundated by spam and other stuff. So, yeah, keep up the good work. We need more people like you to do that kind of stuff.
Like he basically shows here, you don't have to be a C programmer to help out. Even just answering very, very simple questions on the forum. A lot of times people, they have a problem, they post a question, and if they don't get a response pretty quickly, then they get stuck and get discouraged and move on. Whereas if we can make sure those people get an answer pretty quickly, either just from IRC or the forums or whatever, it can help a lot and end up turning that person into another great user.
Yeah, definitely. And 90% of the questions that get sent into, forums or email or whatever, is just a simple command, like, oh, just run this, and that'll take care of your problem. Problem solved. A configuration tweak.
The thing
or
you're looking
something.
for is under this menu instead of where you thought it might be. And so the next question is Roller and Candy's story. So for Roller's part of the story, he says, I heard about an open source project called Asterisk, where you can build your own telephone system. This was around 2005, and he was using Mandriva Linux at the time, along with Windows XP for editing video. This idea of building your own phone system was always something that he wanted to pursue. I had a project involving the need to build a phone system, and I began researching to build one. I came across many OSs and eventually went with CentOS for the project. I just worked so good on this test box that he was using, and it was a Dell XPS 400 or something in that a neighbor had saved from getting tossed due to the blue screen of death. Says to build more on the story in his hunt for the right OS, he wanted to eventually learn and stick with a particular OS and a project community. FreeBSD sparked his interest as a difficult but well-documented and perfect platform for him to get the hang of. He says he found about it watching a Unix CBT video from Dean Davis. Says his videos are very informational, and he learned so much from watching them. It took him a few years of reading and testing with it, and with life getting in the way and slowing him down. But he eventually had his aha moment where everything he'd been reading up to and about the topic suddenly takes hold, and it all just makes sense, right? And he can actually know the material and not have everything just go over his head. He says it's his favorite thing about learning something new. Getting to that point is always exciting. He says, Alan, your point about learning about writing documentation while doing the new thing you're trying to do, then following your docs to do it over again from scratch is great advice. I find that when using this method, I learn so much better, and I'm able to hold on to that new information much longer. He says he remembers trying to get FreeBSD 8 running on his integrated AMD video card. He found some random mailing list discussion and gave the patch from it a try, and he got it working somewhat. He didn't quite pick up package add and using the ports tree very quickly, so he decided to revisit those topics at a later date, which he did. And he says he enjoys using FreeBSD, and he's trying to get it implemented in everything that he does. So then his wife added some notes. So his wife says that as a user of BSD, I love FreeBSD. My husband is always tinkering and changing things on the computer constantly. And there was one day I was complaining to him because the computer was always freezing up or glitching, or it was just really slow. And he was trying to when she was trying to download something, and it was just ridiculous. So he says I was on the computer one day downloading TV shows, and he told me I wish there was a way that I could get my TV shows automatically like cable does. Where I wouldn't have to search for each of them individually. Ever since then, or since they shut down Mega Upload, I've had the worst time trying to get something good to watch. At the time, I was very strict budget, so I couldn't go to the movies when she wanted to watch something. It was the only way to getting movies. So her husband started reading about something one day called FreeBSD, and so the next thing I knew, my computer was being backed up and my hard drive was wiped, and I had FreeBSD. I've been using FreeBSD for about a year now, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This is her husband's programmer computer with SABNZDB or whatever to download Sickbeard and subscribe to the stuff she wants to watch, and then they use the Chromecast to put it onto the TV. She says, I also love the fact that my TV is a Samsung Smart TV, so it can connect right through the Ethernet, and there's no lag from Wi-Fi. And so no matter how fast it is, nothing is as fast as being hardwired into a FreeBSD machine. So she says, anyway, to the crew, TJ, Chris, and Alan, cheers for the great show, and I rate you as the best on iTunes and YouTube, and join every Wednesday when I can to watch the live show. Thanks for taking this entry. I know I procrastinated on sending this in. Also, on a side note, I figure you may be wondering, or maybe just want to share, his username Possum Pfeffer comes from a random word a friend and him made up in the 3rd grade. It was so unique that I ended up using it as his alias because then it's never taken. But that's a good story.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, next up, I'm not sure. How do you pronounce that? Is it
Yeah,
Yui?
you.
Yui? Okay. How I got into BSD. He said, hi, first of all, I love your show. I am listening to every episode and really enjoying the interviews, but also the news, tips, etc. I started using PCs seriously in 1992 while I was studying at university in a non-technical field. I worked almost exclusively on Windows machines and was introduced to Mac OS version 8 and 9 at work in 1998. In 2000, I first tried a Unix OS, which was SUSE Linux 6.4, in a dual boot alongside Windows on my home computer, and I used it for web development with LAMP, and sometime later I then switched to Debian Woody, which became my main OS for several years, followed by Ubuntu, which I've used since its first release until 2009. All the Debian goodies, but desktop-oriented with frequent updates. Wow. Actually, it still runs the family laptop because it's so hassle-free and supports everything the family needs. In 2002, I started working for a small NGO where we shared the office and a Windows server, small office with other organizations. Their server was frequently overloaded and unresponsive. As we did not trust it, we saved most of our work locally with backups from time to time. At some point, I bought an old x86 server with RAID 5 and a tape drive from eBay to function as a backup for the organization. And on this Pentium 3 machine, I installed one of the latest FreeBSD 4.x releases. I believe it was 4.9. How I heard about FreeBSD, I do not remember, maybe on sites like osnews.com. I had come to hear that FreeBSD was performing particularly well on old hardware, which was exactly what I had. I got it working easily and installed Samba. I also started playing with OpenBSD on the Socris, which was supposed to become my Wi-Fi router. In the end, I never really used it because the Wi-Fi network cards chip did not support host AP mode. Another incarnation of that chip did, but I had not paid attention to the difference. In 2009, I started working as an independent consultant and could choose what software I wanted to run. I made FreeBSD my main operating system on the work laptop, and I have not regretted this switch. I have sometimes run PCBSD, but it always seemed much slower on my older laptop, probably because it configures and runs a lot of services and software by default. For you, while on a pristine FreeBSD, everything is off until you enable it. This is true. I also did not like the auto magic that PCBSD does. Some things worked or did not work, but it may not have been obvious why when it came to configuring network and the firewall. But the real problem was that software was not available as a PBI package. Because at that time, software installed via ports was deleted with every upgrade. But I know this has changed, and maybe I'll try again at some point. With features like Life Preserver, it sounds very enticing. You do want to try that. Yeah, all that's changed. PBIs are gone now. It's all package-based, and those don't get nuked when you do upgrades anymore.
And just the boot environment's just... You can't live without that anymore.
Yeah, boot environments, I don't install any machine here, not ZFS anymore, and I use boot environments on everything, including servers and including the firewall I'm building at the moment. So, yeah, it's just, it's a game changer for me anyway. At the moment, I run FreeBSD 9.3 on my ThinkPad, and will upgrade it to 10.x when I find the time. I do not want to just upgrade, but to change the file system from UFS to ZFS. I try to contribute to the community with bug reports on ports that I use, forum posts on bsdforum.de, and occasionally with money to OpenBSD, the FreeBSD Foundation. And in 2004, I was one of the many supporters of PHK when he crowdfunded work on the file system and disk I/O subsystem. And then he has a link to the site for that. Yep, and he says, this is my story, how I got into BSD. Thanks again, and good luck. Well, thank you for sending that in. We appreciate it.
The PHK crowdfunded, before crowdfunding was really a thing 10 years ago, crowdfunded the work on Geom, the storage abstraction layer that's provided us with all kinds of goodies since. So our last story is from Pascal. He says, hi, my background is rather boring, but I think it's applicable to many BSD users out there. He says he was hopping Linux distributions for several years, but didn't get the feeling that he had to give something back to the community. All the topics one could think of were already written down in blogs, and all the packages were written, and there was no need for another person to help out. But last year in the summer, he bought Michael Lucas's book, Absolute FreeBSD. He can't remember why, but I think it's because I wanted to know about other distros, even though, FreeBSD is not really a Linux distro. You get the point.
Sure.
In some of the first chapters, you realize how well structured FreeBSD is. Not a patchwork like Linux, but several good ideas melded into a diamond. To quote Michael W. Lucas, your first shot is free, and then you get open or net. So now he has FreeBSD server for storage, OpenBSD current on his laptop, FreeBSD on a Raspberry Pi, and he's moving his virtual private server from one host that's Linux only to another that supports OpenBSD, so he can run OpenSMTBD and OpenBSD's new HTTPD. He's also organizing a talk to have Rick Floyder and Henning Bauer come speak at his university. Those two are a great speaking pair. Too bad they never had a video of that from VBSDCon. I remember their presentation together was really good. He says he's subscribed to several of the BSD mailing lists, and he's blogging about his adventures in BSD land. And he's also obviously supporting the OpenBSD and FreeBSD foundations with donations, and buying Michael W. Lewis's nonfiction books as well, and Peter Handstein's books of PF and so on. And he's also created his first port for OpenBSD. So he says he has to admit that Michael W. Lucas's advice to become a member of the BSD community helped him a great deal. In short, shut up and work, do what you can do, and do it well, and people will appreciate it. Greetings, Pascal. And he
Very cool. Thank you
also
so much.
included a picture of his book collection. He's got Designing BSD Rootkits. Forget who wrote that one. And then he has the new and old design and implementation of FreeBSD, Absolute FreeBSD, the Book of PF, Absolute OpenBSD, and SSH Mastery. You have to come out to a conference and get Michael Lucas and Peter Handstein to sign your books.
Yeah, you could get a lot of signatures on those. Or Kirk McCusick and
yes,
Giannetta
I have,
as well.
my copy of Design and Implementation has those two. I still haven't managed to corner Watson yet. Although
that's really cool.
Well, I kind of did. At Cambridge, I saw Watson, and he brought with him in a plastic bag a proof copy, which was still regular paper size format, and it was like this thick. But I was flipping through the ZFS chapter back before it was published.
Oh, very cool. Okay, well, we hope you guys have enjoyed this special Christmas episode that we had this week, and have a good and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. If you're busy and enjoy time with the family, and maybe some time off where you can do some hacking and playing around with BSD. I know that's my project this weekend, is to set up a FreeBSD router.
Yeah,
so that's
I'm experimenting in the basement with 10 gigabit Ethernet on FreeBSD.
Nice. Well, I took your advice, Alan. I bought a couple of Intel NICs from Newegg. So they'll be here tomorrow sometime, and that's going to be the new, 2 gigabit Intel NICs, and that's going to be my new router for the house. So I'm very happy. I've been meaning to do this for a long time, but now that I got the boot environments and all that, and all the upgrading stuff sorted out with how we do our upgrades in PCBSD and TrueOS, I'm ready to put this on my router now, because it's going to be cool. I'm excited. But again, we wish you guys all Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And of course, check back with us after the holidays are over. We are going to be on live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1900 UTC. And if you run into something cool over the holidays or have some other neat news or something you want to send in, let us know at feedback@bsdnow.tv. Yes. We would appreciate that.
Quite a few other people are doing little projects over the little break that they get over the holidays, so we'd love to talk about those. So if you're doing anything interesting, write in and let us know. Or if you have questions, we always love answering questions. So let us know.
Definitely. Merry Christmas, everyone. We'll see you soon.
All right.